Hi, this is Ralph for the Prineville Chess Club. In my last game, I wanted to practice early development and castling early, within the first 8 or so moves. And I didn't do so hot. I started attacking before I completely developed. So I still need to work on that. And I'm going to do it again with a different bot. Last time I played against Jan J, a 700 bot on chess.com. This time I'm going to play against Kareem, an 850 bot. And I think as these bots get higher ratings, higher elos, they should end up making fewer mistakes, fewer crazy obvious blunders and stuff like that. It's still going to happen, but I do need to focus on some key things. Developing early, castling early. If I can do all that within the first 8 moves, maybe even the first 10 moves, that seems ideal. So I'm going to go ahead and start up a game with Kareem. All right, and I did random, I believe, but it looks like I got white on this, so I'm going to go ahead and develop. I'm fond of e4. Okay, so it's kind of interesting. They're challenging with this. Yeah, so this is the Duras Gambit. I don't know what that is. Now, a gambit, whether your opponent makes it or you make it, is when you obviously give up some material. And generally you're going to do that for some great advantage, or even a decent advantage. And it could be a material advantage, it could be a position advantage. So whenever your opponent gambits a piece, your spidey senses should be kicking in. It's like, uh-oh, what's the risk of this? Now, this doesn't look like a super obvious risk to me. So I'm going to go ahead and take this gambited piece. Now, okay. Oh, you know what? This is a perfect opportunity. We have not had an en passant move yet. So en passant means in passing, and it's a special move that a pawn can take when the opponent's pawn moves 2 squares and lands adjacent to your pawn. And it could be adjacent to the left or adjacent to the right, either way. But that's the only time you can take en passant. Now, normally a pawn attacks at the corners. I should do those in different colors. The pawn attacks these corners. But when the opponent moves their pawn to the side of yours, you can actually take en passant. So I don't know if that's really the best move, because what I was thinking when I first saw this was, ooh, what happens if I bring my queen out and check over here? And if they blocked with this, then I could take with the pawn. But I do want to do an en passant move, so I am going to take en passant. There we go, and that's how you do that. So yeah, there's a few special moves. Obviously, moving a pawn forward twice at the beginning of the game. Castling is a good special move in chess, but en passant is a good one as well. And I think that is all 3 of the kind of weird, unusual special moves you can make in a chess game. Okay, well, instead of taking back, they have decided to develop their knight, and I'm not too satisfied with Kareem's play here, but that's okay. Even if your opponent does not seem to be playing well, you still want to practice the skills of looking at a position and making the best move when possible. Okay, so obviously I can take, and that does end up developing. I still have some checking opportunities, but the check is kind of losing some of its luster because they can block with this pawn, and I would just have to move my queen away. Part of my objective in this game was developing, and I am not developing as early as I would hope to. I have not developed any of my pieces. And in fact, my opponent has somewhat developed. So it's weird that black is ahead of white in development, because white gets to go first. So I am guessing the best move is probably a takes here, although that does help black develop even more. I'm going to hold off on that. I'm going to develop. And even though I'm not sure if that is the best move, I think it's a very good move to develop. I'm going to develop again. Yeah, I'm going to look at this pawn. Now this pawn is attacked twice, so I don't have any intentions of being able to save this pawn, even though my opponent doesn't seem to want to take it. But what I was thinking, if they did take over here and their bishop ended up over here, or no, if they did a take with a pawn, then I was going to move my queen out, which I still may do, but I want to develop and castle early. So it's our 6th move coming up here. I'm going to go ahead and develop, or I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and castle my king short, which is going to allow me to ultimately move my rook out. Interesting. So I'd really like to get their queen right here. I don't know how easy that's going to be. Well, I'm going to develop more. I'm going to see what happens. I am not worried about the queen ending up in that square because I would have a rook to line up against the opponent's king. Okay, they're making a push. Now, they are making a mistake. They are starting an attack before they have seen to their king's safety. They haven't castled and they're starting an attack, and that's not a good thing generally. So let's see if we can take advantage of this. I'm going to develop this pawn. I am defending it twice, so I wasn't worried about them taking. Ooh, I think we have an interesting opportunity. Let's see what happens if they take with a bishop. Ah, perfect. They took with a knight. Here's what I was hoping for. The queen is lined up with the king, which means I can move this rook out. No, they could have tried blocking to see how that went, but they didn't, so I'm going to go ahead and trade my 5-point rook for their 9-point queen. And I might be getting close to a checkmate pattern here soon, right? Let's find out. I'm going to bring my knight up here. Mostly I'm doing that to free up space for my queen, which I can do now, so I can check their king, developing my queen. Check their king, developing my queen. Oh, and we have a nice fork opportunity. However, I can fork here, which forks the king and the rook. The king would have to move out of the way, so I would be able to take the rook. I'd be winning a rook. So that's certainly a good thing. When you find a good move, is there something better? So winning a rook is certainly nice. Do I have anything better? I may not. Okay, so I'm going to fork the king and the rook, and I will take the rook. Now, what did they take? They took my hanging bishop down there, and I'm actually okay with that. I'm still up the exchange. I took a rook, they took a bishop, but I am a little disappointed in myself because I didn't observe that. I didn't acknowledge that that piece was hanging. I was too focused on this corner of the board. I was too focused on my attack, and I failed to appreciate what was going on down here on this corner of the board. Okay, so that is a flaw in my play that I need to learn from and get better at. So yes, even when you're playing low-level or lower-rated bots, you can still learn from your games. Well, I don't want to exaggerate or compound the loss. I'm going to bring my knight down here. Now, this seems like I could be setting myself up for a pin with a bishop. But had that happened, I would have taken this bishop with check, and that would have allowed me to get my queen to safety. It looks like I'm still going to be able to take this bishop, and I'm taking on kind of a trading down mentality. Okay, this knight is at risk, so I'm going to attack it. They are not protecting it, so I'm going to take the knight. They're attacking my queen, however, I can take back with my knight. And let's see, I guess I might have a checkmate here. It's called a back rank checkmate. Whenever your opponent's king, or your own king by the way, is on the back rank, whatever the back rank may be, so for black it's up here on the 8th rank, for white my back rank is the 1st rank. If it's a very common way to checkmate. Now if I move my queen here, I'm checking the king, and the king won't be able to move out of the way, so black's only option is going to be to block with their bishop, but then my queen can take their bishop. And with my queen on that e8 square, the black king will not be able to escape, it will not be able to block, and it can't take my checking piece, my queen. Therefore, that would be checkmate. And because it's happening on the back rank, where the king cannot escape, it's referred to as a back rank mate. All right, queen to f8. Block, queen takes e8, checkmate. Okay, so that game went a little bit faster than some of the other games, but let's click the game review, see how it records us, see if my accuracy is doing okay. Okay, 90%, I like it. That's an A-. And I also like to see this graph going up a relatively steady upward trend. Yeah, a few dips here and there, but that's not too bad. Once white started with an advantage in the game, it never really dropped down to even. So that's pretty good. And if I look at some of these stats here, I didn't have any misses this time. In my previous game, I did have a miss and no mistakes and a nice 10 best moves. So that's pretty good. So there may not be as much learning value from this game, but still, let's see what happens. I'm going to click the analysis button up here. Again, I don't like to look at the engine lines right away. Instead, I like to look at the icons on the chessboard that I get. And by the way, you can turn those icons off if you find them too helpful. But my eye is also going to keep an eye on this evaluation bar over here on the left. You can turn that off or on too, by the way. And I'm just going to hit the arrows on my keyboard. Yep, so yeah, that was this gambit was not a good gambit because it didn't really lead to any great advantage to black, the side that was gambiting. But that's not true. There are gambits your opponent can play that can actually be not good to take. Oh, look at this. I kind of predicted this. So this isn't a mistake, but it is an inaccuracy. So I took En Passant, which the engine is saying is an inaccuracy. Correct. I kind of expected that, but I really wanted to take En Passant because I haven't done that yet on one of these Prineville chess videos. And so that was an opportunity to do an en passant take. So what would have been the better move? The other move I was seriously considering was queen h5 check. And if they took blocked, I was going to take with this pawn, and they wouldn't have been able to take back because, you know, if they did, I would have been able to grab this rook, and then this knight would have been at risk and stuff like that. So I am going to bet that queen h5 was a really good move. And what else might be a good move on here? Of course, developing is a good move. Knight f3 is a pretty good move. Now, with something like knight f3, you could be thinking, yeah, but couldn't they just push this pawn forward? They could, but then we could respond quite easily with queen e2, and that would be pinning this pawn. and a pinned piece can't move, which means my knight wouldn't be at danger. And so we could have a pin here, and that's kind of nice. Of course, their queen could develop and renew the threat and stuff like that. All right, I think those are probably the best options. I think a queen check or knight f3. Let's see what the engine says. Yep, queen h5 check is the best move. Knight c3 is the second best move, which is way over here. So knight c3 getting developing early. And what was their third best move was d4, challenging this pushed pawn, getting it out of the way, and that also develops and frees up room for a dark squared bishop. Okay, so I was kind of thinking this would have been a good attack, and had that en passant opportunity not been there, yeah, I was going to do a queen h5 check. Okay, I'm just looking at those icons. That was an inaccuracy right there. Developing that bishop to that square. d4 was best, of course. d4, getting this, by the way, I accidentally looked over at the engine line when I saw that, so I can't take credit for spotting d4 that fast. d4 is best. Yeah, sure. Yeah, getting those central pawns, targeting some things. It's not at risk because it's defended by the knight. So, yep, getting things developed. And I guess I was getting a little bit too greedy, right? I was choosing to... Well, I guess I wasn't that greedy. I was thinking maybe I took early. Nope. Yeah, just get those pawns out first and then develop the knight. I don't see how that's that much better. All right. Castled finally. Good moves, best moves. Best move was getting this rook lined up with that queen and king. Oh, interesting. Their best move was to move the knight away. I was thinking their best move may have been to block somehow, but that probably wouldn't have saved anything. Interesting. Knight takes was a good move, but it wasn't the best move. And I guess here's the logic with this one. Pinned pieces should be attacked, not taken. Let's see, am I saying that right? That's a common thing you'll hear from a lot of the big-time chess players and streamers and YouTube creators and stuff like that. Pinned pieces should be attacked. So this queen is pinned. It's not going anywhere. So by my taking the queen right away and then taking back, yeah, I'm gaining a queen, but I'm losing a rook. Well, there was no rush for me to do that. At any time, even if they decided to take my rook with their queen and I take back, it's still the same thing. I'm getting a queen, they're getting a rook. So by taking this pinned piece early, I wasn't doing anything that great. I could just let it wait. So if you've pinned one of your opponent pieces, you don't necessarily need to be in a rush to take it, especially if it can't move out of the way and there's other stuff for you to do. So if I'm not going to take that pinned piece, I can look for other moves that would have been a little bit better. And of course, they're telling me d5 is a great move. Rook takes e7 is actually the next move. So the move I did was rook takes e7, which is like a 6.98 versus the best move, which is a 7.13. So the first, second, and third best moves are all very, very good. They're all similarly good. So it's not too big of a deal, but that's the reason why my rook takes did not get a star. It got a thumbs up. Attack more pieces. And where is this knight going to go? Or this knight here? I guess it's just got to jump away. It's not going to want to jump to the center because then I can just renew and take it for free. It could jump over here. It could jump down here. But even if that's the case, I probably would have just moved forward again. Okay, I think we're doing in pretty good shape. Let me just navigate through. Fork, take. I see lots of green stars and thumbs up, and there we go. Again, that little arrow just means it's a forced move. Black had no other option than to block my check with their bishop. So it gets that little light green arrow, forced move. And of course, we ended up with a checkmate. Okay. All right, another good game. Another game where I did not develop all of my pieces before the attack. So I'm still not demonstrating that as much as I would like to, but I think as my opponents get better and more realistic opponents, like real people opponents, and the bots start getting higher rated, I will be less tempted to pounce early with an attack when my opponent makes a blunder early on. Thanks for your time. Talk to you later.